I'm Dr. J. Peacock, Professor of History at Nash Community College, and this is History 132, American History 2. The first 2 decades of the 20th century are often referred to as the Progressive era. Progressivism was a complicated and in many ways contradictory movement. Although progressives were a very diverse lot, almost all progressives sought to reform their capitalist society in order to save it from itself. Progressives certainly drew some of their inspiration from the populist movement of the 1890s. But whereas most populists were disgruntled farmers and rural people who believed that there was something fundamentally wrong with modern American society, most progressives had no fundamental quarrel with the new urban industrial America. They were willing to use the power of government to help solve some of society's problems, but they wanted no radical reordering of society. Among the major features of progressivism were an attempt to make American politics more democratic by giving the people more control of their government. Progressives also championed order and efficiency in both government and business. Social justice progressives sought to address the abuses of the industrial capitalist system. Progressivism also marked the beginnings of the regulatory state, in which the power of government was used to regulate business in the public interest. In fact, this might have been the progressives' most important contribution to modern America. The Progressive era established the principle that governments, local, state, and federal, had a responsibility to ensure that Americans were protected from abuse by powerful businesses and corrupt politicians. As a Texas progressive said in 1910, most Americans now acknowledge that governments must protect the weak against the encroachments of the strong. Progressivism was largely a middle-class movement that reflected the values of middle-class Protestant America. This led to social reform, but also to social control, as reflected in such reforms as prohibition. And especially in the South, it also meant that many leading progressive reformers were also overt racists. This was perhaps the most glaring paradox of the progressive movement. In the South, the progressive era overlapped with the years of greatest segregation and disfranchisement of black voters. The typical Southern progressive rode to power on a white supremacy platform. Some Southerners saw racism as the very foundation of progressivism. They believed the black man had to be further submerged in order to make way for the advancement of the white race. And so, Jim Crow was only an extreme expression of progressive social control.